there, folks. Root Beer here, and you know what time it is? It's time for another question on the 2003 Grade 7 Gauss. In particular, we're going to be looking at question number 19. So we're almost done Part B, where the questions are worth 6 marks, but we've got our eye on Part C. 5 questions at the very end. They're the harder questions, and they're each worth 8. But we'll get to them, don't worry. So Abraham's mathematics exam has 30 algebra questions and 50 geometry questions. Each one is worth 1 mark, so they're all equally weighted. Nice. He's got 70% of the algebra questions correct, and his overall exam mark was 80%. How many geometry questions did he answer correctly? Okay. So, what we can do, and this is a question where you'll see one of these questions every once in a while, maybe every other year, I would say, where they do things where they mix fractions and percentages and get you to, they give you some fractions and percentages, maybe some for the total or some for certain subsections. In this case, algebra questions. We know how many algebra questions, the percent of algebra questions you got right. And then you'll be asked about another quantity, another subpart of the total. So you'll see questions like this every once in a while. They're good to practice, and yeah, so let's jump to it. We want to know how many geometry questions he answered correctly. So let's be very clear about what we want. The number of geometry questions. So out of those 50 geometry questions, how many did he get correct? We don't care about the percent. If it's 40%, if it's 50%, who knows? But we definitely want the number, not the percentage. So with that in mind, my attack plan is this. I want however many geometry questions he got correct. Okay, I know he has 30 algebra questions. 70 of those he got correct. So 70% of 30, I can figure out how many algebra questions he got correct. How many? Okay, it'll be, I think, 21. And we know in total there's 30 plus 50 questions, so 80 questions. 80% of those he got right. So we can figure out 80% of 80, that's the number of questions in total that he got right. I think it'll be 64. And then the difference between the total questions he got right minus the algebra questions he got right must be those remaining geometry questions that he got right. So if I've done my math in my head correctly, it'll be 64 minus 21, and that should be 43. And if I take a look here, 43 is my first answer. It's A. Does it mean it's correct? No, I might have fudged the details just a little bit, and that's okay. So let's grab a pen and do some calculations and make sure that what I said in my head and what I said out loud turns out to be correct. But that's our attack plan. We're going to figure out how many algebra questions they got right, rather than trying to keep everything as percentages. Okay? So we're going to let A be the number of algebra questions that he got right. T equal number of questions that he got right, the total. And then the one that we want, G, will be the number of geometry questions he got right. Okay. So one thing we can notice is that the total number of questions they got right is just the algebra questions they got right, or he got right, plus the geometry questions he got right. Great. Or we can rearrange this and say the geometry questions are the total number he got right minus the number of algebra questions that Abraham got right. Okay. What we can do, and what I'm proposing, is that we can work out what T and A are, and from there get G. So, there were 80 questions in total. And 80% were correct. So T is 80% of 80. So to work with percents, first thing we do is we turn them back into fractions. That way we can multiply those fractions with the number that we've got. So we're going to do 80%. Percents are measured out of 100. So to turn this into a fraction, we do 80% out of 100%, 80 over 100 times 80. And that'll tell us how many questions we got right. We treat the percents like units. They cancel out. Factor of 10 will cancel out. We'll have 8 over 10. Okay. 8 over 10, well, the 10 down here will cancel out with a factor of 10 and 80, and we'll just be left with 8 times 8. 64. If you can't do that in your head, have no fear, you can use a calculator. Okay? Or you can even start multiplying things out and doing long division. So multiply the 8 times the 80. You'll get 640, and then use long division to divide by 10, if you really have to. Okay? We'd like to always have our calculator at hand, but we must never forget some of the techniques that we've learned, in previous years. Multiplication by hand of, 4-digit numbers. Doing long division to find a remainder. That sort of stuff. Never forget those tools. Just because you've got a calculator doesn't mean that you should be forgetting the math techniques that are the most basic. Okay? Because some year you're going to do a contest that doesn't allow calculators, or some year you're going to forget your calculator at home and no one's going to have a spare. Okay, so it is important to stop and double check and make sure that you can do all this stuff by hand if you need to. Okay, so 64 is T. Great. Now we want A. So we were told there are 30 algebra questions, and 70% were correct. Abraham got 70% of them right. So A is going to be 70% of 30. I almost did 30% of 70, which is actually the same number. And if you want to know why, I encourage you to try and figure it out for yourself. Do a little exploratory math. But as we do this, the percents cancel out. We put it over 100%. Some zeros will cancel out. The 10 will cancel out with the 0 from the 30. And we'll just be left with 3 times 7, which is 21. Now the number of geometry questions that Abraham got right is T minus A, which, as I said at the very start, 64 minus 21. And if you really need to, grab a calculator, but try and do that in your head. The 4 minus the 1 is 3, and no 10s needed to be broken up or carried over. So we can then do 6 minus 2 is 4. And if you needed to, double check 43 plus 21. That's a lot easier to do. 3 plus 1 is 4, nothing to carry. 4 plus 2 is 6. Okay. So our answer there is going to be 43, and I believe I said that it's A. But let's just double check to make sure we're not making a fool of ourselves on the internet. Yeah, there it is, an answer of A. So that's question number 19. In the next video, we're going to go over question number 20.